Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I've been retired for about 6 years now, living alone in my small apartment on the edge of town. My husband passed away a few years back, and my kids are scattered across the country with their own families. I mostly keep to myself these days, spending my time reading, doing crossword puzzles, and video chatting with my grandchildren when they have time. The loneliness can be tough sometimes, but I've learned to manage. One thing I've noticed since turning 70 is that I seem to be on every scammer's call list. Maybe they think older people are easy targets, or maybe they just call everyone and hope someone takes the bait. Either way, I get at least 2 or 3 suspicious calls every week. Some claim I've won a cruise, others insist my computer has a virus. A few even pretend to be my grandson in trouble and needing money. I've heard them all at this point. My daughter keeps telling me to just hang up immediately or not answer unknown numbers at all. But where's the fun in that? After dealing with decades of pushy salespeople, rude customers during my years working retail, and more than my fair share of difficult people, I've developed a bit of a hobby out of wasting these scammers' time. If I can keep them on the phone with me, that's a few minutes they're not bothering someone who might actually fall for their tricks. So when my phone rang while I was enjoying my tea and watching my afternoon game shows, I saw it was an unknown number and decided to answer. What else did I have going on? I picked up and said hello. The voice on the other end was deep and gruff, clearly trying to sound intimidating. He asked if I was the woman who lived at this address. I could tell right away this was another scam call. Legitimate callers usually introduce themselves first and ask for you by name. I told him I was speaking, being careful not to say the word yes. I never say yes to any question from an unfamiliar caller. I learned that trick from a news report about how scammers can record you saying yes and use it to claim you've consented to all sorts of things. He introduced himself as Agent Jack Smith from Border Control and rattled off a badge number, 9570. Then he delivered his bombshell. He told me they had intercepted a large shipment of illegal drugs from Mexico that was addressed to me. I had to bite my lip to keep from laughing. This was a new one. I'd heard the tax fraud scam, the social security scam, and the warrant for arrest scam, but never the drug shipment angle. I thanked him for doing that. There was a pause on the other end. I could practically hear the confusion in the silence. He tried again, his voice getting more aggressive. He said I could go to jail because of this highly illegal shipment. His voice had gotten even more threatening, probably trying to scare me into compliance. Too bad for him, I'd raised 3 teenagers. Nothing scared me anymore. I pointed out that I didn't have to worry about it anymore because he had intercepted it, and I thanked him again. Another pause. I imagined him looking at his script, trying to figure out where this conversation had gone off the rails. He sputtered that I didn't understand. He said I was in big trouble and facing a $5,000 fine that had to be paid immediately. He emphasized that these were very dangerous drugs. Ah, there it was. The money demand. They always get around to asking for money eventually. I told him he was doing a great job protecting me from dangerous drug criminals by catching the smuggler before anything bad happened. I thanked him for his service. I laid it on thick, making my voice sound extra grateful and impressed. On the other end of the line, I could hear him starting to lose his composure. He stammered again, repeating that the fine was $5,000 and that I needed to pay now or I could go to jail. His voice was getting higher now, the gruff authority slipping away to reveal the frustration underneath. I said that sounded terrible, and that I was so glad he stopped this shipment and kept me safe. I thanked him again for protecting me and our border with his diligent enforcement. I added that I appreciated him and hoped he would put this dangerous criminal in jail. He was completely flustered now, unable to follow his script, because I kept thanking him instead of panicking like I was supposed to. I could hear someone else talking in the background, probably his supervisor, wondering why this call was taking so long without getting any payment information. I told him I really couldn't thank him enough for his dedicated service to our country. I mentioned that my late husband was a veteran, and he would be so proud to know there are still people like him working hard to keep Americans safe from drug traffickers. I said he deserved a medal for this. The line went quiet for a moment. He tried one more time, saying I needed to pay the fine. I cut him off and said I should let him go. I told him he probably had so many other dangerous criminals to catch, and that I didn't want to keep him from his important work. I thanked him one final time. I hung up before he could respond, setting my phone down on the side table and taking another sip of my tea. I looked at the clock and saw the whole conversation had taken almost 7 minutes. 7 minutes that scammer couldn't spend trying to steal someone's life savings. My phone rang again almost immediately. Same unknown number. I answered cheerfully. I said hello brightly. He started to say something angry, calling me an old something or other, but I interrupted him. I asked if it was Agent Smith again, and whether he had forgotten to tell me something. I wondered aloud if he had caught the person who sent those drugs to me, saying I would love to know so I could make sure to avoid them in the future. The line went dead. I smiled to myself and went back to my game show. Another scammer handled, another small victory for the day. Maybe tomorrow I'd get the computer virus people again. Those calls were always entertaining. My phone didn't ring again for the rest of the afternoon. I've been married to my wife for 32 years now. We raised 4 kids together, and I thought we taught them about compassion and family values. Our oldest is 28 and she was supposed to get married tomorrow. Was being the key word. My wife's father has been fragile for years. When my wife's mother died 7 years ago, he started declining fast. We moved him into a care home about 5 years back when he couldn't live alone anymore. My wife visited him constantly, sometimes driving 3 hours each way just to spend an afternoon with him. She became even more protective of him after losing her mom. I think losing her mother broke something in my wife, and her father became her last living parent. The thought of losing him too terrified her. The wedding plan was simple. My wife's sister was going to help fly him up today so he could attend the ceremony tomorrow. He was excited about it. Despite his health, he wanted to see his granddaughter get married. My wife had been coordinating everything with her sister for weeks, making sure there was wheelchair access and his medications were sorted. She'd even arranged for a nurse to be on standby during the reception, just in case. The whole thing cost us an extra $2,000, but my wife insisted it was worth it. Then yesterday happened. My wife's sister called in the morning around 9:15 and I heard the panic in her voice even though I wasn't holding the phone. Her father had been rushed to the hospital overnight. His condition had gotten worse rapidly. The doctors weren't optimistic. My wife's sister told us it didn't look good and we should prepare ourselves. She also said she wouldn't be making it to the wedding anymore because she needed to stay with him. My wife was devastated. She spent most of the day on the phone with doctors and her sister trying to understand what was happening. The doctors explained that his kidneys were failing and his heart was weak. They gave him maybe 24 to 48 hours. By evening around 6:30, she made her decision. She was going to fly down tonight to be with her father. She knew what it meant, that she'd miss the wedding, but her father was dying. This might be her last chance to see him alive to say goodbye. I supported her completely. I told her I'd FaceTime her in for the ceremony, that we'd make it work somehow. The truth is, even if she stayed, she'd be miserable. I know my wife. She'd be standing there trying to smile while her heart was breaking, knowing her father was dying alone. That's not fair to her, and honestly, it wouldn't be fair to our daughter either. Nobody wants a mother of the bride who's barely holding it together. I booked her a flight leaving at 11:45 that night. It cost me $890 for a last-minute ticket, but I didn't care. We called our daughter together around 7 to explain the situation. That's when everything fell apart. She exploded. She started screaming at her mother, calling her selfish and horrible. She said my wife was ruining her special day, that she'd been planning this wedding for over a year, that how could her mother do this to her. My wife tried to explain through tears that her grandfather was dying, that this wasn't a choice she wanted to make. Our daughter shouted that she didn't care. She said her mother was choosing him over her. My wife pleaded with her, saying her grandfather was dying and she needed to say goodbye. Our daughter snapped back that he'd been dying for years and one more day wouldn't matter. She said the wedding cost $35,000 and her mother was throwing it all away. She said she'd never forgive her for this. My wife started crying harder and our daughter just kept going. She called her mother unreliable, said she always knew she couldn't count on her, brought up completely unrelated things from years ago. She brought up when my wife missed her high school graduation because she was sick. She brought up when my wife couldn't make it to one of her college performances because of work. It was cruel and calculated. I'd had enough. I told her she was being self-centered and that she should be ashamed of herself. Her grandfather, her mother's father, was dying and all she cared about was her big day. I told her I didn't raise her to be so lacking in empathy, that her mother deserved better than this. I reminded her that my wife had spent thousands of dollars and countless hours making sure her grandfather could attend. I reminded her that my wife had driven 3 hours each way every single week to visit him. She fired back that I wasn't being fair, that she'd been planning this wedding for so long that she needed both her parents there. She said her friends would ask where we were and she'd be humiliated. She said the photographer already charged her $4,000 and now the family photos would be ruined. I told her life isn't fair. Death doesn't care about wedding schedules or photographer fees. Her mother wasn't choosing to miss the wedding. She was choosing to be with her dying father. I demanded that she apologize to her mother right now. She refused. She said if mom wasn't coming, then I shouldn't come either. She said she didn't want either of us there if we cared so little about her. The words hung in the air. My wife looked at me with these broken, red-rimmed eyes. Our daughter ended the call. Then she started spamming both our phones with text messages, paragraph after paragraph about how we were terrible parents, how we were ruining her life, how she'd never forgive us. She said we'd chosen a dying old man over her happiness. She said we'd always prioritized everyone else over her. She said this proved we never really loved her. I turned my phone off. My wife couldn't stop looking at hers, reading every hateful message, crying harder with each one. I finally took her phone away and turned it off too. A few hours later, around 10, I drove my wife to the airport. She barely spoke the whole way there. She kept saying maybe our daughter was right. Maybe she should just stay. I kept telling her no, that her father needed her. At the departure gate, she hugged me and whispered that maybe our daughter was right, that maybe she was being selfish. I held her face in my hands and told her she was doing the right thing, that her father needed her, and that our daughter would understand eventually. She nodded, but I could tell she didn't believe me. She asked me what she should say to her father when she got there. I told her to tell him she loved him and that she was there. That's all he needed to hear. After she left, I sat in the airport parking lot for almost an hour just thinking. Then I called our other 3 kids and explained what happened. They were shocked. Our second oldest, our son, said he'd already been getting texts from his sister about how awful we were. He said he couldn't believe she was acting this way. Our 2 younger kids said the same thing. All 3 immediately said they'd talked to their sister, that she was way out of line. They all said they'd stand by whatever decision I made about attending the wedding. I drove home and sent our daughter one final message around midnight. I told her I loved her, but I wouldn't be attending the wedding tomorrow either. That her mother needed me and family means being there when it really matters. Not just for the celebrations, but for the heartbreak too. I told her I was disappointed in how she treated her mother. I told her that one day she'd understand, but by then it might be too late. She called me immediately, screaming that I was abandoning her. She said I was choosing my wife over my own daughter. She said, what kind of father does that? I told her she abandoned her mother first when she decided a party was more important than compassion. I told her that my wife is my partner, and when someone attacks her like that, I stand with her. Then I hung up. My wife's sister called me around 1 in the morning. She said my wife had landed and was at the hospital. She said their father was still holding on. She thanked me for sending my wife down. I booked a flight for 6 in the morning. It cost me $720. I packed a bag and tried to sleep but couldn't. My wife called me at 3:30 in the morning. Her father had woken up briefly. He recognized her. He squeezed her hand. She got to tell him she loved him. She was crying but also relieved. She asked if I was really coming. I told her I'd be there by noon. Her father died at 5:47 in the morning. My wife was holding his hand. Her sister sent me a photo, and despite the grief on my wife's face, I could see relief too. She made it in time. She got to say goodbye. I landed around 11:50 and went straight to the hospital. My wife collapsed into my arms when she saw me. We spent the rest of the day with her sister making arrangements. Our daughter got married that afternoon at 3. Our other 3 kids attended. They said it was beautiful but felt wrong without us there. They said our daughter barely smiled during the ceremony. They said she kept looking at the empty seats where we should have been. Our son sent me a photo of the bride and groom. Our daughter looked miserable. She called me 2 days later. She was crying. She said she was sorry. She said she didn't know what came over her. She said the wedding felt empty without us. She said she kept thinking about her grandfather during the ceremony. She said she realized halfway through that she'd made a terrible mistake. I told her I appreciated the apology, but she needed to say it to her mother. She asked if her mother would forgive her. I told her I didn't know. I told her that her mother spent the wedding day planning her father's funeral. I told her that while our daughter was walking down the aisle, her mother was picking out a casket. She went quiet. Then she asked if she could come see us. I told her we'd be back in a week after the funeral. She said she'd wait. The funeral was small. Just my wife, her sister, and me. A few of his friends from the care home. My wife gave a eulogy that made everyone cry. We flew back home 6 days later. Our daughter was waiting at our house when we arrived. She brought flowers. She apologized to her mother. Really apologized. She said she was selfish and cruel. She said she understood if her mother never forgave her. My wife hugged her and cried. She told her she forgave her, but that she was deeply hurt. She said the things our daughter said would stay with her for a long time. Our daughter nodded and cried too. Things aren't the same between them now. My wife is cordial but distant. Our daughter is trying to make amends. She visits more often. She asks about her grandfather. She looks at old photos with her mother. But there's a wound there that might never fully heal. And honestly, I'm okay with that. I've been camping since I was a kid. My dad used to take me out to the lakes every summer, teaching me how to set up a tent properly and where the fish like to hide depending on the time of day. When he passed away 3 years ago, I kept up the tradition. It became my way of staying connected to him, I guess. Every few weeks, I pack up my gear and head out to one of the public camping spots around the state. This weekend, I decided to try out Lake Morrison. I'd heard good things about the fishing there, and the weather forecast looked perfect. I arrived Friday evening, found a nice spot right by the water with a clear view of the sunset, and got my tent set up. The whole area was pretty empty, just me and a couple of other campers way down the shoreline. I had my car parked nearby, nothing fancy, just a 10-year-old sedan that had seen better days, but got me where I needed to go. Saturday morning, I woke up early and got my fishing rod ready. The water was calm, barely a ripple on the surface. I cast my line out and settled into my folding chair with a cup of coffee. This was exactly what I needed. No work emails, no traffic, no stress. Just me, the water, and whatever fish decided to bite. I'd been there maybe 2 hours when I heard tires crunching on the gravel road behind me. A massive SUV pulled up, and this woman got out along with 3 guys who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. She was already talking before her feet hit the ground, loud enough that I could hear every word from 50 feet away. She walked toward me like she owned the place and told me I needed to move immediately. I turned around, confused, and asked her what she meant. She explained that this was her spot, that she camped here every single weekend, and that I needed to pack up my things and leave right away. I told her this was a public camping area and that I'd checked in at the ranger station yesterday, so I was allowed to be here. She said she didn't care what the ranger station told me and insisted this was where she always set up. She added that I was fishing in her spot too. One of the guys with her stepped forward looking embarrassed and suggested to her that maybe they should just find another spot since there was plenty of room down the shore. She refused completely and said she'd been coming here for 5 years and that everyone knew this was her area. I reminded her that I got here first and that the whole lake was public access, so she could fish anywhere she wanted. She gave me 30 minutes to pack up, or she said she was calling the police. I told her to go ahead. I turned back to my fishing rod. I could hear her fuming behind me, her voice getting shriller as she complained to her companions. True to her word, about 5 minutes later, she was on her phone with the cops. When the two officers showed up 20 minutes later, she practically ran to meet them, talking a mile a minute about how I was trespassing on her camping spot and harassing her. The officers listened patiently, then walked over to me. One of them asked if I had my camping permit. I pulled out the receipt from the ranger station and handed it to him. He looked it over and nodded, saying everything looked good. Then he turned to her and explained that this was a public recreation area and that anyone with a valid permit could camp at any available spot on a first-come, first-served basis. He added that there was no such thing as a reserved personal spot unless she'd paid for a specific numbered site. She protested that she'd been coming here for years. The other officer said that didn't give her exclusive rights to the area and that if I got here first, I had every right to be here. She yelled that this was ridiculous and that they were supposed to serve and protect. The first officer said they were doing exactly that by protecting everyone's right to use public land. He suggested she find another spot or come back another day. She was red in the face, practically shaking with anger, but the officers weren't budging. They wished me a good day and left. Around 8 p.m. that evening, after I'd cooked dinner and was sitting by my campfire, I heard her SUV pull up again. I looked over and saw her parking about 100 feet away. She got out alone this time. Her friends must have given up and gone home. She walked to the edge of the campground, stared at me for a minute, then got back in her vehicle and left. Something about it felt off, but I shrugged it off and went to bed. The next morning I woke up and unzipped my tent. The first thing I saw was my car. Every single window was smashed. The windshield had a massive spider web crack spreading across it. Glass was everywhere. My stomach dropped. I walked over, trying to process what I was seeing. Then I remembered something. 2 months ago, after my car got broken into in a parking lot, I'd installed Dashcams, front and back with motion sensors that activated even when the car was off. I pulled out my phone and opened the app connected to the cameras. There it was. Crystal clear footage from 3 in the morning. Her walking up to my car with a tire iron, smashing the driver's side window first, then moving around the car methodically, breaking every piece of glass she could reach. The back camera caught her face perfectly as she walked away. I called the police immediately. The same 2 officers from yesterday showed up and I showed them the footage. I watched the color drain from one officer's face when he watched her commit what was easily a few $1,000s in damage. The other officer asked if I knew who this was. I told them it was the same woman from yesterday, the one who said this was her spot. The first officer said they'd need a copy of the footage. They took my statement and the video evidence. She wasn't hard to find since she'd given them her information the day before. They picked her up within 2 hours. I had to get my car towed to a shop in town, which cost me another $200 on top of the insurance deductible. I'd have to pay for the repairs. But according to the officer who called me later that afternoon, she was being charged with felony vandalism and criminal mischief. She spent the night in jail and was looking at serious fines and possible jail time depending on how the case went. When they arrested her, she tried to claim I provoked her by stealing her camping spot. The officers reminded her that her own phone call to them the previous day had confirmed it was public land and I had every right to be there. My car took 2 weeks to fix. Insurance covered most of it, but I still had to file a civil suit to recover my deductible and the towing costs. She pleaded guilty to avoid trial and had to pay full restitution plus court fees. Her lawyer told her that fighting it was pointless when there was video evidence of her committing the crime. I still go camping at Lake Morrison, haven't seen her since. Back in the early 2000s, I was working as a manager at Hooters. It was actually a pretty fun job most of the time and I learned a lot about the restaurant business. We had this regular customer who was this older guy, probably in his 60s, who came in almost every day. He was hilarious and always had us cracking up with his jokes and stories. The staff loved him because he was respectful and always tipped well. One day, this old guy decided to play a little prank on us. He He was always watching us work and had noticed how we filtered our fry oil every single night. When you filter used fry oil, there's always this layer of cooked flour that gets caught in the filter. It looks kind of like breadcrumbs but darker. Usually we just threw it away, but this guy had a different idea. He took some of that filtered flour and mixed it with some other ingredients to make what looked exactly like brownies or peanut butter squares. They looked so real and appetizing that you'd never suspect anything was wrong with them. He left them in our break room and told us they were free treats for the staff. Like clockwork, someone would always grab one, take a big bite, and then immediately spit it out. The taste was absolutely horrible. Imagine chewing on old, burnt flour mixed with the essence of everything that had ever been fried in that oil. It was nasty but completely harmless. We all got a good laugh out of it, and it became this running joke at the restaurant. Fast forward about 10 years later, I had moved on from the restaurant business and was working in sales and customer service at a large cable and internet company. The office had about 300 employees total, and I worked the second shift, which only had about 50 people. It was a pretty decent job, good benefits, and the work wasn't too stressful most of the time. But there was one major problem that was driving me absolutely crazy. Every single night someone was stealing my food from the break room refrigerator. I'd bring my lunch or dinner, put it in the fridge with my name clearly written on it, and by the time I went to eat it, it would be gone. This wasn't happening once in a while, it was literally every night. I tried everything I could think of. I wrote bigger labels with my name. I put my food in different containers. I even tried hiding it behind other people's food. Nothing worked. This person was determined to steal my meals, and it was costing me money because I had to buy food from the vending machines or order delivery instead. After about 2 months of this happening, I was fed up. I decided I needed to teach this food thief a lesson they'd never forget. My first idea was to make some brownies with laxatives baked into them. I figured whoever was stealing my food would get sick and learn their lesson the hard way. But when I mentioned my plan to my roommates, they immediately shot it down. They explained that if someone got really sick or had to go to the hospital, I could get fired or even face legal trouble. They were right, and I realized I needed a different approach. That's when I remembered the old guy from Hooters and his fake brownies made from filtered fry oil flour. It was perfect. It would taste absolutely terrible and teach the thief a lesson, but it wouldn't actually harm anyone. It was just disgusting, not dangerous. I went to the grocery store and bought everything I needed to make Hooters-style buffalo wings. I got chicken wings, hot sauce, butter, celery, blue cheese dressing, and some flour for coating. My roommates and I spent the evening making about 30 or 40 wings using my little tabletop fryer. They actually turned out pretty good, and we had a nice dinner. When we finished eating, I let the oil cool down just enough to handle safely. Then I started filtering it just like we used to do at Hooters. I collected all that nasty flour residue and mixed it with some other ingredients to make it look like legitimate brownies. They looked so convincing that even I was impressed with my handiwork. The next night, I took my fake brownies to work and put them in the break room refrigerator in a container clearly marked with my name. Then I went to my desk, which was positioned perfectly near the break room where I could keep an eye on things. About 2 hours into my shift, I heard this horrible hacking and coughing coming from the break room. When I looked over, I saw one of the quality service managers spitting all over the floor and screaming about who had tried to poison her. She was making this huge scene, yelling and carrying on like someone had tried to kill her. I just started laughing. The whole situation was so ridiculous and satisfying after months of having my food stolen. She noticed me laughing and immediately walked over to my supervisor to complain about me. My supervisor called me into his office and asked what I thought was so funny about someone supposedly being poisoned. I explained the whole situation to him, how someone had been stealing my food every night for months, how I'd made fake brownies using the old Hooters trick, and how they were completely harmless but tasted terrible. At first, he was trying to stay professional and serious, but when I explained what had happened, I could see him trying not to smile. When I assured him that the brownies weren't actually poisonous or dangerous, just disgusting, he completely cracked up laughing. when he realized that nobody was actually in danger and that this woman had brought the whole thing on herself by stealing food that clearly wasn't hers. He told me to go back to work. But the story doesn't end there. The quality service manager got written up for taking someone else's food from the refrigerator. Apparently, the company had a strict policy about that kind of thing, and since she had basically admitted to stealing my food by complaining about it, she got in trouble with human resources. I made sure to tell everyone in the office what had happened. Word spread quickly, and soon the whole second shift knew about the fake brownies and how the food thief had finally been caught. People thought it was hilarious, and I became something of a legend around the office. My food never got stolen again. Not once. Apparently, word had gotten around about what would happen to food thieves, and nobody wanted to risk it. I could finally eat my own meals in peace. The quality service manager tried to make my work life difficult for a while after that, but it didn't last long. She was so embarrassed by the whole incident that she ended up leaving the company just a few months later. I heard she found a job somewhere else, hopefully where she learned to bring her own lunch. I was 24 and working as a bartender at Downtown Groove, a popular dance club in the city. I'd been there for about 8 months, and honestly, I loved the job most of the time. The music was loud, the crowd was energetic, and the tips were usually decent enough to help me pay my way through college. I'd started working there after my previous job at a coffee shop wasn't cutting it financially. Between tuition, rent, and basic living expenses, I needed something that paid better. A friend of mine who worked security at Downtown Groove told me they were hiring bartenders, and since I'd picked up some basic drink-making skills from watching YouTube videos and practicing at home, I figured I'd give it a shot. The manager liked that I was friendly and could handle pressure, so he hired me on the spot. The job was intense but fun. Friday and Saturday nights were absolutely crazy, with people packed shoulder to shoulder on the dance floor and 3 deep at the bar. I'd learned to move fast, remember multiple orders at once, and keep a smile on my face even when things got hectic. Most customers were pretty cool, they understood it was loud and busy, they'd wait their turn, and they'd tip reasonably well. But then there was this one guy who became a regular problem. He'd show up every Friday night like clockwork, always around 9:30 p.m. Middle-aged, wearing the same type of polo shirt every week, and with this attitude like the world owed him something. The first time I served him, I thought maybe he was just having a bad night. He ordered a whiskey sour, which was simple enough, but when I told him the price, he literally threw the money at me. Not handed it to me, threw it. The bill scattered across the wet bar top, and I had to chase down a 20 that almost fell into the ice bin. I figured it was a one-time thing. Maybe he was drunk or distracted. But the next week, same thing. And the week after that, every single time he'd order his whiskey sour, I'd tell him the price, and he'd just toss the money in my general direction like I was some kind of vending machine. Never a please or thank you, never a tip, just this dismissive attitude that made my skin crawl. But the money throwing wasn't even the worst part. After he'd get his drink, he'd plant himself right in front of my section of the bar and just stand there. Not dancing, not really talking to anyone, just taking up prime real estate where other customers needed to stand to order drinks. I'd have people trying to squeeze around him, waving money over his head, practically climbing over him to get my attention. And he'd just stand there like a statue, completely oblivious to or uncaring about the chaos he was causing. I tried being polite about it at first. I'd lean over and ask him if he could maybe move down a bit so other customers could get to the bar. He'd look at me like I'd just asked him to solve calculus, shrug, and maybe shuffle 6 inches to the left. 5 minutes later, he'd be right back in the same spot. Week after week this went on. My co-workers started noticing too. Sarah, who worked the other end of the bar, would roll her eyes whenever she saw him come in. Even Marcus, our bouncer, mentioned that the guy seemed like a real piece of work, but management's policy was pretty much to put up with anything when customers weren't starting fights or breaking things. The breaking point came on what had already been one of the most stressful nights I'd had in months. We were short-staffed because 2 people had called in sick The music system had been acting up all evening, and we'd had a bachelorette party of 12 women who kept changing their minds about their complicated cocktail orders. I was already running on fumes when 9:30 p.m. rolled around. Sure enough, in walked my least favorite regular. Same polo shirt, same entitled swagger. He muscled his way to the front of my section, completely cutting in front of a young couple who'd been waiting patiently for 10 minutes. The guy looked at me and just pointed at the whiskey bottle, like I was supposed to read his mind. I was so tired and frustrated that I almost snapped right then, but I took a deep breath and made his drink. When I set it down, he just stood there staring at me. I told him the price was $8.50. Without a word, he pulled out a $10 bill and just flicked it at me like he was feeding a pigeon. The bill hit my chest and fluttered down onto the sticky bar floor. I had to bend down and pick it up while he stood there looking bored. That was it. Something inside me just snapped. I walked over to the register, punched in his order, and pulled out his change, a $1 bill and 2 quarters. Instead of handing it to him like a normal human being, I held the coins up so he could see them clearly. Then I threw them down toward the counter hard. The quarters hit the bar top and went flying in opposite directions. One bounced off into the crowd on the dance floor, and the other ricocheted toward the wall. The dollar bill fluttered dramatically through the air before landing somewhere near the beer taps. His jaw literally dropped. For the first time since I've been serving him, he looked genuinely shocked. I told him oops, and that it looked like his change got away from him. He stared at me for a second, then at his scattered money. The dance floor was packed, and people were stepping all over the place where his quarters had landed. If he wanted his $1.50 back, he was going to have to get down on his hands and knees and crawl around in the dark, dodging dancing feet and spilled drinks. He asked me if I was serious right now. I told him that accidents happen, just like when people throw money at other people instead of handing it to them. He looked at the chaos on the dance floor, looked back at me, and I could tell he was trying to decide if $1.50 was worth his dignity. Apparently it was, because he actually got down and started scrambling around looking for his change. It was honestly beautiful to watch. Here was this guy who'd been treating me like dirt for months, now crawling around on a sticky club floor while people accidentally kicked him and stepped on his hands. It took him almost 5 minutes to find both quarters, and by the time he stood back up, his polo shirt was stained and his hair was disheveled. He grabbed his drink without making eye contact and disappeared into the crowd. I didn't see him for the rest of the night. The next Friday I was wondering if he'd show up. Part of me hoped he would. I was curious to see if he'd learned anything from the experience. Sure enough, 9:30 p.m. came around, and there he was. But this time was different. He waited in line like everyone else instead of cutting. When he got to the bar, he actually made eye contact and politely asked for a whiskey sour. The word "please" coming out of his mouth hit my ears like music. I made his drink and set it down. I told him it was $8.50, and he pulled out exact change and placed it carefully on the bar top. Then he took his drink and walked away to find somewhere else to stand that wasn't directly blocking other customers. He kept coming back every Friday, but his whole attitude had changed. He'd wait his turn, say please and thank you, and he even started leaving small tips. Nothing crazy, but 50 cents or $1, which was infinitely better than nothing. Most importantly, he stopped camping out right in front of my section of the bar. Word got around among the staff about what had happened, and it became this legendary story that people would tell new employees. Sarah started calling it the night the regular learned manners. Even the manager heard about it eventually and just laughed. Apparently, he'd been getting complaints about that customer's behavior too, but nobody had found a way to address it without causing a scene. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.